my heart is still breaking. From separated families that have still not been reunited with their babies, to accelerating pollution, to packing the lower courts with all these sketchy judges, and now a second Supreme Court pick for Donald Trump. I feel like the Republicans are just really, really abusing their power. And they kind of swagger around, hate to say it, like this big ruling party. They got a mandate to represent the majority of Americans and do all this stuff. But in fact, that's not true. One of the reasons everything feels so crazy is we're living through something that's really bizarre. It's not really majority rule. It's more like one-party minority rule. Never forget this. Based on the 2016 popular vote, the Republican candidate lost by nearly 3 million votes. But with the Electoral College, they handed the victory to Donald Trump anyway. Okay, fine. But then in Congress, the Republicans have more seats than they probably deserve. How did that happen? Well, back in 2010, midterm election, just like this year, the Tea Party came out in force and the Democrats stayed home. So the Republicans bet on these state races and they got enough power to quietly reshape all these congressional districts in their favor. And worse still, the Supreme Court. The Republican senators just stole Obama's seat and gave it to Trump. So now in all three branches of our government, the White House, the Congress, and the Supreme Court, Democrats have less power than we arguably should have, and the Republicans have more. Now that does not sound like a democracy to me. It's very heartbreaking, and the Republicans are playing a very dangerous game. When you bend and break the rules so anything goes, everything eventually goes, including respect for our institutions, and then nobody's safe. And the Democrats have to learn too. Voting matters every time, even midterm elections. Not voting on one day can hurt our communities for decades. So, how do we get our democracy back? That's why I need some hope. I need some help. And guess what? Our next guest leads one of the most diverse cities in the world, and he just got reelected with 81% of the vote. So he might know how to both win elections and bring people back together. Welcome to the Van Jones Show, the mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti, in the house. Oh, we need you. We need you.
Good to see you.
Oh, man. Thank you so much. Oh, have a seat.
Yes.
Have a seat. Man.
Great to be here.
What is your secret? How do you get people to come together across all these different lines? You got every race in the world in one city. They all get along. They all love you. What are you doing here that should be happening in the rest of America?
Well, first of all, we need to spend less time on our Twitter feed, on our Facebook feed. We need to spend time with each other, with our families, with our communities. I see hope everywhere in this city. And this city is full of Midwesterners and full of immigrants. It's full of people from every nation and every corner of this nation. Mm-hmm. And I think when we have common work, rather than people who are seeking to divide us, telling us what they can take away, we can get together and add to each other.
Why do they all like you, though? I mean, it's like you got
I got plenty of detractors. Look, 81%, do the math. That means almost 1 million people didn't vote for me in LA. So this keeps you humble. But I think.
But what are you doing right?
You know, I think here we're focused on results. You know, in Washington, you have imaginary problems, and they can't even solve the imaginary problems. Mm-hmm. Here we have real problems: infrastructure, homelessness, traffic. And I think people respect those of us collectively that are addressing real problems rather than the imaginary ones we get out of the White House.
Well, when you say imaginary problems, what do you mean imaginary problems?
I mean, a problem of their own invention.
Like what?
Did somebody say they had to separate children from their parents at border? They created that problem. They can't even solve that problem that they created. And as the grandson of an immigrant who was carried as a baby over the border, right there in Texas at El Paso, a refugee from war, my great-grandmother's husband, my great-grandfather killed, carried over the border with her baby. Imagine if he had been snatched away. They are creating these problems. They are picking fights. They are losing friends and allies. Whereas here, we're concerned about our bills. We're concerned about our housing, our education,
let's talk about
those things.
Let's talk about here, because you do have some real problems that are tough to solve.
Absolutely.
On the one hand, you have been able to have this ethnic diversity work for you, but you also have an economic divide that's horrible. You've got some of the richest people in the world big homeless problem. What do you say to people who say, Eric Garcetti's America would have millions of homeless people in it?
Well, it's under Donald Trump's watch as well. We have a national crisis. I mean, when it comes to, for instance, a mental health crisis, we have folks that are dying in Appalachia of drug overdoses. We have people on the streets of LA who are living in tents because we have no system. I mean, if you and I broke our legs and went to the emergency room, both of us would be treated. But if we had an addiction and we show up for medical treatment, maybe 1 out of 10 of us would. That's unacceptable. Here in LA, thanks to voters, we passed the 2 largest measures in history of the United States to end homelessness. And that is my goal, not to address it, but to end it. I'd sure love to have a partner in the White House, love to have a partner in Congress, but we don't have that.
Well, you mentioned the White House and I didn't, so that opened the door for me now. What kind of Democrat do you think could both win the Democratic Party nomination as the party moves further left and beat Donald Trump? That seems like a Houdini trick to me.
Look, it seems pretty clear that Americans in general don't wake up and even define themselves anymore just by a party, not by Democrat or Republican. They wake up and they say, who's listening to me? Is somebody listening to my problems, or are they talking about themselves? Is the Democratic Party obsessed with its own agenda, or are Democrats actually listening to Americans who are suffering right now, who are going through really tough times, even in economic plenty, as you mentioned? There's tremendous anxiety. So I think, first of all, one who's decent. We have to bring some decency back to this country because the White House ain't pushing that out. Yeah. Second, somebody who listens. And third, a problem solver. We actually hire people to solve problems, and that's not something that Democrats have always said we're about.
Are Democrats listening, though? I mean, for instance, right now there's a big push on within the party. Some of the younger, more activist wing says abolish ICE. Mm-hmm. You take that out to Iowa. Does the Democratic agenda around abolishing ICE even resonate?
No, I think, look, you don't back off of your values. We need to reset the mission of ICE, but the idea that we wouldn't go after child traffickers or, folks who are bringing pornography into this country, people who are, breaking the laws, we need that, but the leadership has given them a mission that's making us less safe. So we've got to change this conversation. Too often we're taking the bait of somebody like Donald Trump and talking in his terms and playing on his ground. We have to reclaim that. For instance, on MS-13, that's his, fabulous whipping boy. He loves, it's almost his Willie Horton of this moment. To say MS-13, we're being invaded by all these folks. Well, the greatest force for actually combating MS-13 isn't Donald Trump, it's the Los Angeles Police Department. And we don't just do it by going after gang members, we invest in young people so they don't become gang members. We've cut crime in half here because we know how to do it right. So I'll never listen to a politician over police officers and interventionists who know how to keep streets safe for our own families.
Listen, you've been, first of all, I like what you're saying. It makes me feel good.
Good.
Last time I felt good, there was a guy named Barack Obama that was running. Yep. You had a chance to go work for him, and you talked to him, and you said he gave you some of the best advice in helping you turn his job offer down. Tell that story.
Well, he was offering me a job to come work in the White House and oversee HUD, Department of Education, Transportation, all kind of the urban portfolio for America's cities, to be like the city czar. But he took me in the Oval Office and he said, what do you think? And I said, well, I'm thinking about running for mayor. He said, well, if you think you got a chance, you should do that. So I called him, next week. I said, you're a really bad salesperson, but you're a great advisor. I think I'm going to run for mayor. And I really owe him a debt of gratitude because, look, running for things, you take risks. You have a lot of personal sacrifices for your family and yourself. But if you believe in your mission, you should always, whether it's in politics or in business or just the activism we see in this country, we got to seize this day. You got to jump in, and President Obama taught me that. Yeah.
What advice is he giving you now? I know he's been talking to a lot of people, including yourself. What advice is he giving you?
I'll respect that his counsel is private, but look, he wants us to win. But I think he wants us to get back to being a party of listeners again, a party of decency. Not so much about where you are in the spectrum, because I can go with the most progressive folks. We made community college free here, raised the minimum wage here. We've been fighting climate change, not just here, but around the country. But I think Americans are looking for people who are problem solvers, and he really pointed that out. He said, people could smell the Midwest on me when I was in Iowa. They might have seen an African-American man, but they knew the Kansas mother, and they could kind of sense that I was from the heartland. And I'm a big believer the heartland doesn't just live in the heartland. It lives right here in South Los Angeles, in the San Fernando Valley. It lives in our coastal cities. It lives in rural and urban areas. And these false divides that have been peddled by so many people are not the America that I know and that I love.
So, listen. Seriously, Matt, I've known you for a long time. I knew you when you were a community organizer. I've watched you kind of climb. What does your heart tell you about 2020?
My heart says we all better step up. that almost any patriot with a chance should be thinking about what they can do in 2020, what role they can play, and in 2018, because Donald Trump's not on the ballot now, but we have a Congress that enables him for the next few years. But I think that as long as you can add something to a conversation, you need to stay in that conversation.
But does that mean that you're going to run?
I have no idea. I really don't. I mean,
at?
I have to talk with family, but I'm exploring and looking at America and realizing when I go to a place like Iowa, it's the #1 wind state in America. We're the #1 solar city in America. That should bring us together. Jobs in the green economy, as you know, don't just exist in the coastal areas. When I talk to folks that are in South Carolina, they say it's still not where we need to be in terms of civil rights and police and community relations. As a mayor, I think I can bring something to that conversation.
No mayor has ever gone from City Hall to the White House, and the last mayor that tried was Rudy Giuliani, who spent, I think, $18 gazillion and didn't get one delegate.
To be clear, not a role model for me in so many ways. But yeah, I mean, no African American had been elected president till one was, no TV reality star till one is. I think the rules are off. I think Americans want people who get things done. We have the largest port in America right here. 40% of all the goods that come into this land come through our city. One of the largest airports, the largest municipal utility. You know, we know about Homeland Security because we have police forces. We have to deal with civil rights issues. We have to make sure we have economic development and trade. I want an America that's competing to win the future. Right now, I see a White House wanting to kind of rewind the clock back to a time that excluded a lot of us and something that's not possible.
You've been traveling around. You know, all this stuff sounds really good, but you show up, they're going to say, look, this guy is a blue coast, the middle of the bluest of the blue, sanctuary city. I mean, what the heck? I mean, what kind of reception are you getting showing up as a LA mayor from Hollywood, Berkeley State?
Well, Americans are a generous people. I think we hunger to connect right now. That's what should give you hope, and I hope everybody here and watching hope, is that we're a decent people. I don't believe in those two Americas they keep talking about, but there are two. It's Washington and the rest of us. We have folks that are doing incredibly inventive work all across America, waiting for us to listen and connect with them. And I think that's what's missing right now. We have indecency instead of decency.
I like what you say about the listening, because a lot of times we need a better message, we need a better message. Sometimes we need to actually be speaking at people less and listening more. One thing you did really well and have done really well, you got LeBron James to come to your city.
I know.
That's kind of a big deal.
So let's stack it up for a second. So Trump's got Dennis Rodman to North Korea, and I got LeBron to Los Angeles. I don't know. I think
well done, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Amazing stuff. But you know, if LeBron runs for mayor, you're finished.
Oh yeah.
Just know.
Luckily,
just
I'm turned out. So
exactly, you're
it's all
turned
good, right?
out. Good stuff.